Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Isabella Perry and I'm going to be your moderator for this presentation. Today's presentation is on food fraud prevention, the growing threat of food document fraud, presented by Dr. John W. Spink from Michigan State University. So I have a few housekeeping things before we start. There is going to be a Q&A at the top of the Teams control panel. So throughout this entire presentation, if you have any questions, please use that portion of the control panel to ask any of your questions, and we'll be as quick as we can to answer those. You will be muted and no cameras for this presentation. So yes, we advise you to use that Q&A if anything does come up. Now the slides and the recording of the presentation will be available on our website later today. So if you miss anything or want to come back to it, it will be available on there, as well as our YouTube channel. And any additional questions, please contact us through our website and we'll be able to help you. Now, Dr. Spink will take it away discussing today's topic.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good day, everybody, I guess. So the sound is fine, just sound check there?
Yep, sound great.
Yeah, good, all right. Well, this has been great, and really, you've been a great group. I'm so appreciative for the chance to talk. The feedback I get from you, your insight on the field is really crucial. Everything I do, every project comes from people like you asking questions about what you think is interesting, but also then refining. Because when I talk about this, you're going to have some other questions or some other insight. And I wasn't auditing a company yesterday. I wasn't looking at food documents this morning. You were. So you're really crucial to that. So really overall for your company and your clients and customers, I really thank you. So one thing that we've been researching and talking about as a group here is documents and food document fraud. And so this is an area actually about the last 3 years, we've been looking at it closely and then writing a paper. And some of this academic work is absolutely mind numbing. I mean, a root canal might be more interesting and more pleasurable than, 3 years of digging through ISO and other places to look at terminology. And it seems so simple at the end the last slide is going to give you a couple recommendations. It's going to seem so simple, but to get to that simple point, to have it completely covered is the thing that's kind of excruciating detail. So if you don't know me, food fraud prevention is the focus of my life, I guess, even family. I've got my daughter now working on some projects with us. Foodfraudprevention.com is the website. There's tons of information there, free videos, a lot of things like that there. We have courses and everything. So I'm not going to get into those too much, but we're going to jump right into it here. So what I'll cover today is food fraud trends. So what's happening in the field, what's changing some things, what's adjusted over time. It's been a crazy since COVID, and COVID itself was crazy, but just so many things changing. We'll look at documents and document fraud. The world is going more digital. We now have artificial intelligence, which is very excellent at helping us, but also maybe creating some of those fraudulent documents that may deceive us. And then that's when we look at food document fraud. What is it? And the big key, like in the area of criminology and crime, is once you define something specifically and narrowly as a thing, once it's a thing, then you can have countermeasures and control systems around it. And documents, blah, 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 blah. But when we really start to define these details, as you'll see, then again, we can look, okay, well, this part of the document we're looking at, this step in the supply chain where a document is used, we'll look at that. And so we had to go back and look at that. And then to get to you, my role is to always get to something very, very practical. So if you are an auditor, if you are a document records entity, company, group, if you're a purchasing manager, if you're a food fraud manager for a company, that we've got something very tangible. And one thing we did is summarize this in our huge 400-page, I guess it's a book almost now, is down to this primer document. So you'll see that on the right. So that's the overview and basics in there. And that has a lot of the background of what I'll talk about today. So the thing that we point out is everything's connected to everything. We want to say, it'd be nice to have one action, oh, just get IT, oh, just blockchain, just whatever, and we're going to have AI look at it. But it's really not. And so really all the domains have to get together to look at the problem and understand it, and also to respond to it. So I think academia for us, one thing that we do, especially in our group, very practical, is we just listen to everybody. We try to figure, almost like we're doctors, and you come in and say, I don't feel very good, and I kind of look at things, and then definitely working closely with industry because they're the ones that have the most control. Because if I'm buying from you, I'm receiving product from you. That's a direct tier one physical handoff. Also, I'm giving you money. So that's the most direct and tangible and controllable node. And then look at associations. So that's looking broadly at industries. And from there, it works into standards and certifications. So for the food industry, that's a global food safety initiative, which is the foundation for, as well as ISO International Standards 22000, the base for the food safety management systems. And then regulators have an obviously important role. I would say a lot of times they're just helping confirm that we have these things in place, and then we review it as well. So that's where we do look at everything to move forward. So food fraud overall, what's been changing? And what I would say is it's kind of hard to figure out how to explain this. And I'm not really satisfied completely with it yet, but I think it works. The landscape is formalizing. So there was all these things going on. We're kind of chasing these different type of problems, almost like feeling our way through a problem. First thing we see is supply chains are going digital. They've been going digital, but there's even more. And now with AI and data, we need more data to be able to search it. So people are putting their data together. And they're calling these, there's data warehouse, which could be inside your company or in operations, then data lakes. So all these warehouses and big groups together. So it's almost all this data is there. The thing that's great now is that we don't have to have the data in the same format. And a lot of times it wouldn't, if you didn't have the exact same text defining a category, you couldn't find it. But now AI can interpret what you really mean and things like that. So getting all the data together is key. And with that, we've got even things like real-time tracking. So we can track things in to look at anomalies in real time of product that's shipping. Omni-channel operations. So omni-channel, if you haven't heard that, a lot of times omni-channel is talked about in marketing. Omni-channel marketing is that, let's say right now you wanted, well, we ordered a dash cam for our car, to video yourself while you're driving. Best Buy is where we buy from. Well, we could access Best Buy from anywhere, from our phone, from our laptop, walk in, call them, whatever. We can access anything, and they could ship it from anywhere. It could come from the local store. We could pick it up. We could have it shipped. They could ship it from a warehouse. So omni-channel marketing is that way that we interact with companies anyway. The other side of that is omni-channel operations. So they, like REI and other big companies, Walmart, anybody, they can then decide how they get that product to us. Sometimes someone from the store is dropping it off on their way home from work. That's crazy. It's amazing. But all of a sudden, we've got all these supply chains that are just massively changing. Automation is everywhere. Duh, but it's even more so. And so we then look at that from the supply chain standpoint. Ordering gets to be more automated. There's automatic triggers. There's rules that people will have for like Best Buy reordering for a store. It can be automatic. Approvals can be even more automatic now. There's more logic applied, and compliance checks can be more automated. That means things can move faster. I just heard Marathon Petroleum Company. One of my students works there, and one of their processes to do a changeover took 2 days to plan. It now takes 20 minutes to plan. That's because automation is everywhere. All these subroutines, they could just build and make a decision, but also along the way, as it's being implemented, the system could automatically adjust along the way. So we didn't have to worry about all 50 steps. We could kind of push it in that direction. Global Food Safety Initiative, absolutely big, still really important. The core. Enterprise risk management. So we see this coming more into day-to-day operations. If you're a public company, enterprise risk management is a part of Sarbanes-Oxley requirements. And there's the compliance side of it, but then there's just the business decision making. So we see a lot of this coming into the business. And enterprise risk sets these like risk tolerances. And that, if we know what that is, that can fit into the automation. So even if decisions are being made about ordering product and keeping inventory on hand, it can then automatically sync with the overall, risk appetite of a company. And SCRM is supply chain risk management. And that's a real thing that people study, is to look at inherent risks in the business. What's great for us in the food side, food safety side, is that that's now a formalized corporate supply chain procurement finance concept that's then giving us a lot more information. They're all converging, and they're all leading to give us a lot more insight or defined that food fraud is a defined problem, but also it gives us more support in decision making, which will, in some cases, will give us money or resources. So what does that mean? More opportunity, better visibility. For everything of the product as well as our work, more vulnerability. There's more entry points for fraud to occur. Oh my gosh. You look at some of these omni-channel supply chains, especially if you have DoorDash delivering or Ship It or different things like that, and you have influencers on social media. Wow, the vulnerability points just went up quadruple. Documents are the connective tissue, and that's one thing we found. Every food fraud incident has a document. Every one. Documents facilitate fraud because it's either the invoice, it could be the web page, the marketing on a social media influencer's page that says this product is organic. That's a document. Now, that's different than an invoice, but still it's a document. So those documents facilitate fraud. Now, if you even define as a company, if you define the social media person talking about this, then you're now are looking more broadly at it, and that's great. Prevention must formalize, and that's the thing we're seeing here. Corporate at the very high level is really pushing that. I'm headed to the IAFP conference next week. Have a number of meetings with VP level folks, and they are definitely getting together to really try to push formalizing this across the supply chain. And you'll see that McDonald's just did a webinar with them that they are updating their food safety policy system, and that's a kind of an add-on above GFSI, and they have an expanded food fraud section in there that really just formalizes it. That's where we're going. This digitalization, I guess I probably talked about most of this already. I went into detail. Visibility all the time. We can know food fraud incidents. We can look very quickly to find those. I won't go into the details, but the big key there is that we're seeing now is that maybe we can find a certificate of analysis that was used for an automated check, but ended up later when it was actually reviewed in detail, that C of A ended up being fraudulent in one way or another. Could be the date, reusing an old one, or even changing products in there. So supply chain digitalization has a lot of great promise, but there's a reality in there that there's also a chance for manipulation. More touch points. Actually, I did go into this with omni-channel. Boy, there's so many ways for us to get product, and that's great to make the product move faster. Less inventory. That's a big one. Less inventory. So for sale products. So we live in Michigan. It's really hot now. Well, let's say in the winter. Michigan's cold. Florida's warm. So a company that sells exercise clothing in Florida in January, when it's cold, they're going to have a lot of sales. Up north, we don't. So the product up north would be on sale, clearance to move it. Well, now if you order that product online, their system can look at the whole supply chain. They can see in Michigan there's too many bikini bathing suits, and so if you order a product, it can then draw from that inventory from a local store. That's absolutely amazing up there. So it can come from anywhere, and that helps companies increase their success, profitability, because they're not discounting that product and not missing sales down south. Consistency gap we see. Some documents are verified in great detail, in some places some aren't. So as product comes in and moves through, that there may be consistency gap. Information doesn't scale. So it's one thing if you're buying from one company, but now when the product goes through these other third parties or is delivered by a Ship It or somebody like that, you've got the informal situation doesn't scale. To have those individuals delivering product. You get a photo of that product being dropped off at the front porch of your house, but actually we had a situation where there was a picture of a product got dropped off my sister's house, and from Amazon probably. Amazon took the picture of it to confirm it was there. And then the driver realized they were at the wrong house. So they then picked up the product and drove away. Our neighbor saw that and told my sister. So there again, if you have a photo of that product on your porch and you didn't get the product, you don't know, unless you have a Ring doorbell to record, you don't know what happened to it. And even in that case, it was a missed delivery. So that there's this informal process that's tough to scale. Massively open marketplace. Oh my gosh. Consumers can order from anywhere, anytime. It's hard for me. This is what I study all the time. As I'm trying to buy a product, it's hard for me to sometimes to figure out where I'm really getting it from. Because you go to a Best Buy or a Walmart.com or Amazon, that product might be coming from Best Buy, but it might not. It might be coming from a third party. So that's there is very clear to look in there of who are you actually buying it from. And it's harder and harder to figure that out. Supply chain. So we're trying to formalize this and with supply chain mapping. A lot of times you can't go beyond that tier one first direct supplier. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, depending on the nature of the product itself. But we really say beyond that, a lot of times it's a black box. One of the senior food industry experts told me about their supply chain was you can trust as far back as you can trust. So not assuming that you can see all the way back, but how would you go from a tier two to that black box in the marketplace? If you really don't understand and can't follow that product all the way back to the field and the company that's making the product, then you realize that you can go to tier one and tier two, you can't go beyond tier three. So the question gets to be, how could we be comfortable that product coming in from tier three into that other supplier is legitimate and safe and is what it says it is? So that the thing is right now, look, by doing the supply chain mapping, we've identified that as the question to ask. At that point, if it's skim milk powder, then the tier two supplier would be then asked, encouraged, or required to do a lot of authenticity testing, more quality testing, and things like that. If you can't confirm from tier two to tier three that they are legitimate and they're following the process, then you have to do things to make yourself comfortable that they are. And document fraud can apply it at any level here, especially that coming in from the third tier into the second. If you don't really know the people that you're getting information from, if you just ask for a C of A or a food safety test or whatever, then you're just getting the document. You're not, unless you have a way to authenticate the document, then it's just a piece of paper until you confirm it. And that's a key, as you'll see a little bit later. So we had to dig in to look at the supply chain mapping to then look at these things. So all supplier tiers, not just tier one, you have to understand those relationships. Again, but if you can't identify or really monitor or control beyond a tier, then you just identify that as a fact. Graphic risk factors and transportation routes. So different parts of the world have different issues going on, transportation routes as well, such as through a free trade zone. There's no controls, no oversight in a free trade zone. So it's not saying that a product is bad if it goes through a free trade zone, but there is a vulnerability. So that may be if it's coming directly from the UK to the US on your truck or your ship, then that's one thing. If it goes through a free trade zone, then there might need to be just one little level of scrutiny to look at that vulnerability. Document flows and handoff points in each tier. That's a key to know who received what. Where did they receive it from? Now, if that tier two supplier received a lab test about their tier three supplier directly from Eurofins, then that is a different, or directly from the testing lab that's a known, verified, validated strategic testing lab, then that document now is a lot more trusted, lower vulnerability than if it's just a PDF that was emailed. So that's a look at where product moved. Also, if those documents had the ability to be changed or updated or altered. Where products enter or exit controlled supply chain. That's key. So a product might be the tier two supplier, and there might be different ways that it ships to the tier one supplier. It might be direct on their own trucks. It might be through a third party. Maybe there's some maybe things get tough and they do a spot order, last minute order of a truck through somebody else. So all of a sudden, those different types of controlled supply chains are a real key to look at. Once it sounds super complex, but once you lay this out for yourself, I mean, there may be very few situations where some of these things are happening, but then if you then all of a sudden tell your supplier, hey, if you use an on-call spot distribution trucker, we're going to set that product aside and do authenticity checks, and we're going to charge you for it. You add that in the policy. If they want to use it, hey, knock themselves out. If that's a lower price and it's fine, that's great, but they're going to pay more for the testing. But that will then discourage them from using more vulnerable routes or vulnerable work processes. But we need to map it to understand what's going on. Critical control points where authentication matters most. So when we look at the whole supply chain, we consider all these things. Okay, which products really matter and why? And that's a combination of which ones have the higher fraud opportunity, maybe organic versus not, halal, kosher, whatever versus not. those statements. Could be the public health. You know, that's infant formula. That could be the only source of nutrition for a baby. That's very, very high risk. So with the critical control points on those products or processes that really do matter most. Then back again is something we've seen over time is, and we're getting this direction, such as the McDonald's work, such as other groups, as you'll see over the next just couple months. This fall, there'll be a lot more push. Really look at food fraud again, your system-wide food fraud vulnerability assessment. And most likely, most people have their assessment out of date, and there's a reason why. It's not, I mean, well, I was going to say nobody did anything bad. No one did anything intentionally wrong or bad, but hey, we did an assessment a long time ago, right at the beginning of GFSI, and then we only did them for new products, new suppliers, if there's a problem. But GFSI and the standards do require looking at your entire supply chain at least every year for food fraud. You want to do that because things do change over time in a big scale. So why it might be out of date, most assessments were done back in the very beginning of GFSI. It was first required in 2018. Now, some of those weren't complete at that time, but still, that was the first step. Operating models have changed. Wow. Omnichannel, digital workflows, a lot has changed. In 2018, I guess we're almost looking at nearly 10 years, or not quite, 7, 8 years, but still a lot, unbelievable amounts of things have changed. And omnichannel, more products moving around the world in different ways, new suppliers. Wow. Fraud landscape has evolved significantly since then. That is an understatement. The fraudsters, think about AI and creating documents, creating videos. You could create a video of a walkthrough of a plant. AI, and it's even we can't believe what we see. We need to believe a lot more what we feel and touch and what we test. Your digital document flows weren't mapped. Back then, we weren't even thinking about documents. We just kind of said, is there a C of A, or what does a C of A say? We weren't thinking about it, and we realized they do need to be looked at. That current assessment is adding omni-channels or the new types of fulfillment, automated systems, just to look at what's in there for digitalized workflows, document flows as well. That's kind of the next level to then look at what documents we receive, how we receive them, what's authenticated. And then indirect suppliers. The thought of that supply chain mapping, we usually look at it from us, maybe one step up, but us to our customer, just to go a little farther up in the supply chain. A lot of times these can be very general industry-wide assessments. So things like the Peanut and Tree Nut Association, they do these broad assessments of the entire industry. And that's really, and it's a macro view, but it helps everybody understand the situation. So defining food document fraud. I feel like I don't know if I've been going a mile a minute or not. Probably have, but this is recorded, so you can go back if you need to. So we then said, okay, all these things are happening. Documents are a concern. What are we going to go do? Well, everybody knows a food document. Why do you need some academic crazies to go look at this? Well, that was what we thought, and we went a little deeper and deeper. So we've got the types of documents, the formats, the functions, and information on them. And as we went in and looked at things like ISO standards, international standards, and other types of definitions, we started to detail these aspects. So all food fraud has fraudulent documents. And one of the problems there is that comparing different documents or having AI or other things look at it, no consistent definitions. Even the word like document fraud, food document, concepts related to the lack of the definitions led to confusion. Like, we have a document. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, what's on the document? So there's no consistent definitions or even the part of the information on the document. No organizing framework. So as academics, it is important to go back before we start to do really, analytical research, empirical research. We need to have a typology, meaning we need to have a definition of the types of documents. And when we submitted this article, and it got rejected right away because people said we were mixing up all the terms. Well, we kind of were, but we realized that we hadn't really found a typology yet. Like, are they digital documents? Are they e-documents? Is it e-commerce? Is a physical document that's been digitized? Is that what's that? So we then had to go back and go into those details to at least set the foundation. And we see definitely a critical gap in the standards. What I mean by that is things like how a standard or an agency or others would define the term, and then how we're supposed to process those terms, and specifically even looking at documents that have been forged or altered. An example was in our research, someone said, "Oh, FDA has already covered this, so you don't need to do anything." So we looked closely at the FDA documents. FDA focuses on documents that have been altered or forged, meaning a legitimate document that has the dates or numbers or whatever changed, or a document that's been completely faked. So, okay, that sounds right. But there's another category we found. What about a document that doesn't exist, that never existed, but someone refers to it? And be like, "Oh, that's crazy. What are you doing? That doesn't make any sense." But think about it. As we started to look at it, we thought, "Oh my gosh, that is a huge miss," because people are looking, they're assuming there is a physical document there to look at. So there could be the time where someone says, let's say it's a social media influencer, and it says, "This is FDA certified or USDA organic." Then they're referring to the USDA organic certificate, or they could say, "We have the certificate," and they're referring to it. That document might not exist at all. So there needed to be a category for that. Now, just because someone tells you, you ask your supplier, "Are you USDA organic certified?" They say yes. "Do you have the document?" Yes. "What year was it? What date?" They could give you the dates, fill it in on a form. But that doesn't mean that they actually do have a physical document that's either altered or forged or genuine, and it may not exist. So part of the system is to say, when you're receiving information, when you're asking suppliers about things like organic, halal certified, whatever work process, is to just have in the system that this is, does the supplier have it? Yes. Did the supplier submit documents? Yes or no? Just yes or no. That's just a checkbox. Now, I mean, still programmers have to put that in, but just, did you receive a document? And then if you did receive the document, do you have it stored, in an encrypted, secure place? And then last is, did you authenticate the document? Now, that's not saying that if someone doesn't submit the document and you haven't authenticated it, that doesn't mean that there's a problem. It just means that you haven't checked it. You don't have it. You haven't checked it. So, see, again, that's the key, is that we didn't even realize that, oh my gosh, we don't actually have it. We just assumed, why would someone tell you they have it if they don't? Because they might get caught. Well, because the fraudsters and criminals are not smart. So again, that was a real key here, is just adding to that category that, again, what's the statement, this specification that they are certified food safety management system. Let's say yes. Which system? BRC. Gotcha. What date? All that. And then, did you receive the certificate document, and then did you confirm it? That's where food document fraud is moving for us. So overall, intentional deception for economic gain using food, which is the food fraud example, by misrepresenting information in a document or the document itself, or related to food activities. Now, that's beyond just the food itself, because it could be tariffs, it could be weight, it could be other things that are going on there that related to commercial activities to make money. Could be fake returns or things like that. Could be some tax documents. But the key there is information in the document or the document itself. So if someone doesn't have their BRC certificate, then that's the document that's been fraudulent. They faked the whole document. But it could be misrepresenting information on the document, in the document. They could have a certain BRC, they could have a BRC audit for ground meat, but not for bread. There again, they might misrepresent the information on there. So what we see there with the documents, to start to understand, what is it, we're looking at what's going on, so we can try to dissuade people from acting. Double check. Good, looking good on time. Intent. Yeah, it's intentional. Someone knows what they're doing. Now, the problem is it's hard to prove intent or understand intent. So we look at vulnerabilities. And a vulnerability is based on a couple things. So regardless if someone is trying to cheat you or not, they just might be sloppy and use the wrong paperwork. But regardless of that, we see a vulnerability. So we look at gain. Is there a financial motive? That distinguishes fraud from negligence. And so it's one thing if they just have a document that's expired or something, but it's another if they then get a new sale or something like that, some type of economic gain. And then we look at the document. And fraud operates through that document as a mechanism. So we then, at the same time, we look at that supply chain mapping to see where we're working and where there is this fraud opportunity. And that's where we start to then just, again, the very first steps, such as just confirming that they have the document, confirming that they've submitted it, and then finally, for the most sensitive ones, most important ones, confirm that you actually did authenticate it. So, sorry, didn't mean to yell. Getting me excited. We then, again, so this first article got rejected. I would say legitimately rejected because we were not very specific in defining specifically the digital documents. What is digital? What is an e-document, electronic document? How do you refer to it? Where is a computer file? And so we then went back and defined these. So the ones that we know really kind of common sense, physical, analog, paper. All right. So I've got my passport here someplace. Actually, I better have it someplace. We'll say this is my passport. Got a physical passport. All right. So people can look at that. Digital. Well, with passports, they're all the information is not online, but some are. So things like car registration. You can show a police officer by the side of the road in Michigan a link to your digital copy of your insurance, proof of insurance. That's digital. And then there's this product that started as physical or product that was born digital. So like those for insurance for your car, proof of insurance, that's a born digital document that your insurance company created digitally. Now you might ask for a physical copy to put in your car. That is then the physical paper document. Now hybrid is actually, I'm going to make a note because this is a good example. Hybrid. Dual format document. Now, for you, when you pull over the side of the road, this is a hybrid document. The information is proof of insurance. It is legitimately and authorized, officially physical in that paper you have, but it's also digital. You could show it on your phone. It's hybrid. Either one of them works. Either one of them is an official record. And then multi-factor authentication. So think about your bank. And that's actually where Passport comes in. You go through Passport Control, they see the document, then they also run it to double check whether it's biometrics or things like that. They look in the system. But like your banking, you go in and then you get your code on your phone you have to enter. That's multi-factor. That's great. So now we've actually started to define those. And then again, using examples like a passport or the car proof of insurance, then we've defined those. And that's where we saw this gap. And the phantom document. We actually did a ton of research, crazy research on that as a term. And it does work as a term because there's other legal terms of a phantom stock, a phantom sale, in medical, a phantom limb, phantom pain. There's a couple others in industries, but that works here where it was never created. The situation there with the car insurance would be that you pull over and the officer says, show me your driver's license registration here, and proof of insurance. Oh, I've got it, but it's at home. But if you don't have it, it's claimed but does not actually exist in any form. Now, that officer at that time, they could say, oh, that's okay. But actually, I know from one of my neighbors is that then you get a citation for no proof of insurance presented. Now, what happens later is then if they get online, the neighbor got online and could upload it and show that they had it, and then that violation went away. But in that system, they identified the lack of that actual document. At that point, they asked for it. Someone said they had it. They confirmed that it was not received, that they did not have it to see it, and then they asked someone to then take the next step. Now, if you then upload that to the website for the Secretary of State, then that becomes a digital document. You do now then have in their system that digital document. So all of a sudden, that situation goes from it being a phantom document at that time to the digital document. Now, if you're on the side of the road and you show them this, it's a physical document. They look at it and it's fine. Now, that could be fraudulent, but at that point, then those are things that are not they're not super high stakes. So at that point, then unless there's other issues, then that police officer probably is not going to go through the effort to authenticate that document. So then integrating into your system, and this is what we're trying to do. I mean, we try to always get to things you can actually do. So integrating food document fraud. One second here. All right, so formalize this step. And that's it, just to look at your vulnerability assessment and include in there a category of an incident, whether it's dilution, substitution, document. So, I mean, sometimes you might find a document fraud. Now, if you have a category, you might not have put anything or remember anything now, but I would say that in the future, all of a sudden, if something does come up where a document is expired or things like that, you now have a category to place that in. That's really proactive. That's looking at the future. You now have a place to sort and put that data in. Train your team. So that's something we're trying to look at more. That's why we're having this type of presentation, why we're combining with your group to share this out, to start to raise the awareness. We'll have a lot more training on this. We'll have a massive open online course. We'll have more videos and things like that. But educate people on this. After it's just a category in food fraud to train people what to look at. Usually it's just in the system of a checkbox that, did someone have it? Did we receive the document? Update your expertise. We're going to do this over time. We haven't even published the first article, haven't even had the first MOOC program yet, but we're already looking at the next step. And we've got colleagues that search law cases, because information is there as public. We're going to go through those to look at how documents have been used over time and as they evolve. Also looking at people like your company to look at different audit protocols and processes of how people are looking at this and where we see these new incidents occur, and build verification systems. So at the very end, beyond this, mapping the supply chain, looking at problems, receiving the documents. At that point, then you start to assess where there's vulnerability and where there is the biggest problems to put in place those independent verification for those high-risk documents. And there are a lot of companies will like for the food safety management system certification, so BRC, FSSC 22000, SQF, IFS, whoever, is that they will, you put in the system the certification code, and then they will automatically check that. Like our MOOC certificates of completion, our master certificate, those have a authentication code. So if someone says that their team, if you require someone to have expertise on their team and they say they've got our master certificate and they have the code, you can actually go check that. And don't just accept claim documentation without that confirmation of existence for those key topics. So I put this in kind of for myself, but we then dug in because this got to be so detailed and so confusing for us. And we tried to look at how the different concepts are all combined. So at the very top, we have this idea of what we call a document. Any format in a medium or a form. It was probably 2 days studying and reviewing a medium, a media, format. Oh my. Anyway, it was nuts. But as we get in there, that it's the document. Now, the key on that document, there is data. So data is just what it is. Data comes in. Data is really raw. And that data is either structured or unstructured or semi-structured in the middle, very formal, or it could be an email. That would be unstructured. A voicemail, a talk on the phone as maybe you're filling out the supplier survey on the phone. That would be very unstructured. That becomes information. So it's just raw data is what they do. Then you're starting to put it in your system, say, yes, they have a food safety management system and they're certified for BRC on this date. That becomes information, separate from the document. And then you've got the form. So that could be discussion, could be, or is it the day? Like the form would be more like it was BRC, it was certification number, certification date. That's kind of the form of the information, the layout. And then the media or medium is how they're telling you. That could be verbal, it could be an email, could be a physical document, could be a format, whatever. Could be not a format yet, but the layout. And the format is everything come together. And unbelievably, form and format are different things, and they're not really connected. The format is everything come together, that information all together. Now, the information goes on a type of document at that point. Right now, it's just out in cyberspace. And that's where we got the physical, digital, hybrid, multi-factor, or phantom. And all that comes together to be a record. Because when you ask for that document, are you certified with a food safety management system? You're asking for a record. And the record is that, yes, they are, and it's BRC and this and that. So that gets to be the data in there. Now, once you've got that, that is a part of the big structure of what is the document. So why? Why did he put us through that? The key is we've had to go through, we on our end have had to dig through this in such excruciating detail because we need to define things like those documents, phantom, but also what information asset is on there and which one is crucial for that record. And so we've got to that point of defining all these different things to help you with that first step, which will be a little bit next. So as we're looking at moving it forward, this is more something I'd use in an academic lecture. Again, we've got all these collaboration points to try to think about this, and at the end we want to unify consensus. What are we looking for? So when a USDA organic inspector comes in, or investigator if there's a problem, they look at your systems and you've defined the fraud terms and how you're working all these things together, then they're confident of the documents that you have. And that's the big bottom line for this slide. Actually, I probably shouldn't have put this in here. It's really too much for us right now. So here it boils all the way down. This is the biggie. What to do now? So every food fraud event includes fraudulent documents. It's not just a side issue. And then the 5 document types, just know what those documents are. Phantom documents are a key in there. And then the real what to do now are you should organize, food document fraud as a formal step in your vulnerability assessment. So that next time you really look at the overall system or do annual review, is having documents be a specific page or section to look at what documents you use. Maybe it's even looking at that supply chain map and to see which documents are used at each point. And to just identify that, as well as have it a category of a type of fraud act. And then think of this as an active multi-year initiative. So you're just starting in, just like we said back at the very early signs of GFSI starting and GFSI emphasized, just get started. So consider documents and document fraud as part of that vulnerability assessment. Consider to have a place to store incidents or concerns separately, so you can look at those, and then consider expanding your system to actually do those assessments and look further at it. And it all comes together with all of us, and that's it. And that's what we're trying to do here with us as academia, and then with you and your company and your colleagues. So check your documents is what we'll say. So we've got a lot of resources here. The MOOCs are there, free open online courses. We are going to have that MOOC in the next 2 months. We'll probably have it. If you follow us at all, it'll be very, very marketed and widely shared. We want to hear from you on that. So with that, I'll take discussion. Let's see if I can go up here and look at chat. Well, I think one of the things that comes up is why haven't we done this before? Well, I think that food fraud is a new area, and this is actually, we just were talking about this with somebody yesterday, is that 2017 GFSI said they released the updated system that was going to be required in 2018. So people at that point had the year to get ready for their food fraud audits. And at the beginning, you're just kind of checking things out. Auditors are just looking at it, 2018. And from the research, it shows that usually 2 years later is when things really get formal. So the first year you just do it to say, hey, what does this look like? The auditors don't know. Others, how do we feel about it? And then the next year you're putting it in place. And then it's that following year you start to say, oh, now I understand. Now I get it. Now let's get serious. Maybe it's like a vegetable garden. The first year you just throw stuff in. The second year you are trying, but those eggplants didn't grow. And the third year you now have studied it. You know which ones you need to focus on. That was 2020. Well, what happened in 2020? COVID. So let's say 2 years of COVID, of craziness and supply chains recovering. But then there in 2020, 2022, 2023 was Ukraine, Russia. Wow, that disrupted so much. That was quite a shock for the world. Just kind of government-wise interactions, but supply chains as well. And also then it was inflation, product moving around the world. But I think after that, inflation is going on, tariffs are going on. We've got the product in and out of the Middle East moving in ships, and now possibly the Red Sea, Suez Canal. There's just been one thing after another that have been delayed. Now, the thing that we do see, and it's really odd here, not odd, it just is, the IAFP next week, a lot of the VP level people in companies are now really wanting to look more formally, kind of simply, directly at food fraud as a vulnerability, as a supply chain vulnerability. And me as a supply chain management professor in our business college, we're dealing with companies and they're trying to understand the inherent variability in their entire supply chains. In the past, we were going from food safety, food fraud up, trying to say, hey, listen to us. But now we're getting it from the top. There's systems in place to really look at those vulnerabilities. So that's why we see it starting to happen now. Now, with that, we're going deeper, and those higher level activities are more focused on documents themselves and more rigid compliance requirements looking at documents, like hiring people. Is that not just to say you've received that document, to then go back and really check and assure. So we're seeing this from the corporate standpoint, from governance, that documents are more important, and that kind of applies with what we've got as well. Okay, let me look back up here. Good one. So how's an auditor to know if there's document fraud or not? Now, if you see the early GFSI guidance on food fraud, they call it a technical document. We were really a key part of that. We call it out. Hey, we're not experts in every single thing, and the bad guys are going to get better and better at these documents. And actually, I just did a blog post, 2 blog posts on fake returns, fraudulent returns at retail. And one of the things they said, the processes in the documents are getting absolutely almost indistinguishable and tricking systems. But that's a part of if I go back up a couple slides, where was the multi-factor? See, just like your banks, we can apply that. So you're getting information, but you're also confirming it someplace else. And that starts to be a key, that when we see things get more and more complex, the thing that you know, that if you bought this is collagen peptides, you've got this. I now have the physical product. And if they say it is 10 ounces, plus or minus whatever, I have the physical product. I could actually test that. So when it's the theory and observation, you can now observe. And that's what we're looking at here, is that we're just getting more mature in the food fraud vulnerability assessments and system, and there's a more maturity and more detail in that product. Well, yeah. Now then I see kind of what's next. That's the biggie. I tried to have at the very beginning that. And I should put it here at the end too, the QR code. We're starting to just define what this is, and in that primer on food document fraud, we're expanding that to give those real direction steps, and that's going to help those first steps along the way. Again, I think if anything, thinking about documents as things come in now, if you are involved, if the food fraud prevention team for your company, to start to just think about documents in there, and that may be that first step. And we're going to try to work together to start to explain that in more detail. Well, I think as I'm looking, I don't see any more questions come up. What I would say is, if any of you here or later on the video are going to IAFP next week, would love to meet you. So the Food Fraud PDG Professional Development Group meets on Sunday morning, and so that's open. But also Tuesday afternoon, we have a presentation, 1 o'clock. So I'll be there and would love to meet anybody there. So with that, unless there's more questions, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Spink. Since there aren't any other questions, we will end today's presentation. After today, kind of like Dr. Spink said, if you have any other questions, just feel free to reach out. And like I said at the beginning of the webinar, the slides and the recording will be available in the next few hours here. So keep an eye out for those if you want to reference back to anything. Now, everyone have a great rest of your day and keep an eye out for upcoming webinars. Thank you.